From 134 million packages in 2015 to 1.36 billion in 2024, over 4 million parcels a day, America's de minimis loophole became the backbone of cheap online shopping, the White House admitted. But on May 2, 2025, Trump's administration struck it down for China and Hong Kong, and by July 30th, extended the kill switch to every country. Reuters reported Shein and Temu spiraling. GQ warned of $80 to $200 surcharges per order. As prices skyrocket, one question cuts through. Has cheap e-commerce just died? For nearly a decade, the de minimis rule was the invisible fuel powering America's e-commerce boom. With a duty-free threshold of $800, consumers could click buy on platforms like Shein, Temu, or AliExpress and receive packages from Asia within days. No tariffs, minimal paperwork. What began as a modest convenience in 2015 grew into a tidal wave. 1.36 billion packages entered the U.S. under this rule in 2024 alone, averaging more than 4 million a day. Cheap fashion, electronics, and household goods became staples of American life, while Canada watched as its southern neighbor embraced frictionless global shopping. But prosperity carried hidden costs. Lawmakers grew alarmed at the scale. Domestic retailers cried foul, arguing they couldn't compete with tax-free imports. Security officials warned that packages slipping under customs thresholds could bypass scrutiny. Inflation, meanwhile, revealed how fragile the bargain was. By early 2025, political momentum shifted. On May 2nd, the U.S. revoked de minimis privileges for China and Hong Kong. By July 30th, Trump signed Executive Order 14,324, eliminating the $800 exemption for every nation. What was once a golden artery of consumer choice now fractured, with ripple effects spreading across borders and industries. On May 2nd, 2025, the Trump administration announced the first strike. Packages from China and Hong Kong would no longer qualify for the de minimis exemption. Instead of slipping through customs tax-free, every parcel carried duties, sometimes 120% of value, or flat fees of $100 to $200. For Shein, Temu, and thousands of small U.S. consumers, the effect was immediate. Prices surged, deliveries slowed, and bargain hunting online suddenly felt like a luxury. By July 30th, the hammer fell harder. Executive Order 14,324 wiped out the $800 threshold for every country, effective August 29th. No more exceptions, no more free rides. The White House defended the move with dramatic numbers. In 2015, 134 million packages entered under de minimis. By 2024, the figure had ballooned to 1.36 billion, averaging more than 4 million parcels daily. Officials argued the loophole had become a pipeline for unfair competition, counterfeit goods, and security risks. Trump himself framed it as restoring fairness for American workers and retailers, but the economic ripples told a different story. AP News reported chaos at customs, with low-cost electronics, toys, and fashion items delayed or abandoned. GQ warned consumers of $80 to $200 surcharges per order. Reuters noted Shein's U.S. sales plunged 11% in May, Temu's collapsed 23%, while even global payment giant Adyen cut growth forecasts, sending its stock down 18%. Walmart, Amazon, and big box retailers gained share, but at the cost of higher checkout prices nationwide. The de minimis kill was framed as an act of sovereignty, but in practice it was a tax shift from foreign companies to American consumers. What once was invisible, a silent subsidy through global logistics, was now glaringly obvious at the register. Washington claimed victory, but millions of families found themselves paying for it. Across the border, Ottawa recognized opportunity in Washington's retreat. Canada had its own de minimis regime, set at $40 Canadian for duties and $150 Canadian for taxes. Unlike the US, it wasn't generous enough to flood the market, but neither was it dismantled in such a dramatic sweep. As American consumers balked at surcharges, Canadian logistics firms, retailers, and policymakers spotted a gap, the chance to rebrand Canada as North America's friendlier e-commerce hub. Business Insider described it as the silent substitute. International brands looking to bypass America's customs storm began exploring Canada as a staging ground. Fashion distributors shifted inventory north, eyeing fulfillment centers in Toronto and Vancouver. Electronics suppliers rerouted some flows through Canadian warehouses, banking on fewer consumer shocks and access to alternative markets. The federal government reinforced this opening with trade-friendly messaging. Ottawa leaned on its reputation for stability, highlighting efficiency gains from the One Canadian Economy Act, Bill C-5, which tore down interprovincial barriers and created a smoother domestic market. The Washington Post reported this reform unlocked new logistics synergies, making Canada more attractive for cross-border commerce. At the consumer level, the contrast was stark. While U.S. shoppers faced $200 fees on low-value imports, Canadian buyers still accessed moderate thresholds. Retailers capitalized. Amazon Canada and Shopify promoted duty-paid guarantees, while domestic platforms leveraged the Buy Canadian movement to emphasize resilience. The divergence didn't mean Canada was immune. Retailers still depended on U.S. distribution hubs, and Canadian families worried about knock-on inflation from shared supply chains. Yet, symbolically, the shift was profound. America chose confrontation. Canada positioned itself as a collaborator. For the first time in decades, the global online shopping conversation tilted north. Despite diverging paths, the U.S. and Canada remain bound by the same consumer expectations and shared logistics backbone. Cross-border shopping is cultural as much as economic. Canadians buy from U.S. websites. Americans cross to Canadian platforms. Killing de minimis didn't eliminate this web. It strained it. For Washington, backtracking would mean admitting that punishing Shein and Temu hurt U.S. households more than foreign competitors. Politically, that's nearly impossible. For Ottawa, pushing too hard to capture America's displaced demand risks sparking retaliation from its largest trade partner. The result is a stalemate. U.S. consumers pay more, Canadian firms gain cautiously, but both economies absorb instability. Small businesses on Etsy and Shopify lose international sales, while big-box giants consolidate power. Payment networks struggle with reduced volume, logistics hubs groan under new paperwork, and households on both sides rethink the value of cheap global shopping. The de minimis war isn't producing winners, it's exposing vulnerabilities. North America has reached a fragile balance, one where sovereignty collides with interdependence, and neither side has a clear way out. In Vancouver, logistics firms felt a surge of interest as international retailers sought alternatives to America's restrictive regime. Warehouses near the port expanded capacity, and companies like Shopify marketed Canada as a safe entry point for global e-commerce. Ottawa's reforms under Bill C-5 helped too. By removing interprovincial barriers, products could flow more efficiently from West Coast ports to central Canada. Local retailers benefited as shoppers turned to domestic options highlighted under the Buy Canadian banner. Yet the gains came with pressure.
As
Smaller
American
Canadian
workers,
businesses
what happens when their
struggled to keep
factory
up
closes?
with demand as
As a
global
consumer,
suppliers rerouted
what do you
orders
do?
through
It's like
Canadian
paying
networks.
import tax for my blood
Families
vessels.
noticed that
Tax
while
on
goods
tax.
arrived more reliably than in the U.S., prices still crept up because of shared supply chain inflation. In Windsor and Toronto, some complained of delays tied to customs bottlenecks created by increased
It's like paying
traffic.
import tax for my
Canada's
blood
advantage
vessels.
was real,
Tax
but it
on
was
tax.
less about escaping costs and more about buying time in a turbulent global market. For Americans, the pain was immediate and visible. AP News reported that Shein and Temu shipments now carried $80 to $200 in added fees. A teenager ordering $25 shoes found them doubled in price before reaching checkout. Low-income households, once reliant on cheap imports, bore the brunt. Etsy sellers, who had dreamed of competing with Shein, also struggled, as their own international customers faced higher costs and delays. Major retailers gained some ground. Amazon's U.S. sales rose 11.6% in July. But consumers didn't feel relief. Instead, they faced higher grocery bills and rising electronics prices, amplified by a 0.9% surge in the Producer Price Index. Detroit's auto industry was squeezed too. Tariffs pushed up costs for imported parts, undermining production schedules. Payment processor Adyen cut forecasts after transactions tied to de minimis collapsed, wiping 18% from its market value. What Washington framed as fairness felt like regression. Americans weren't just paying tariffs at the border, they were paying them at the register every day. De minimis once symbolized the promise of cheap, borderless shopping. Now its demise divides the continent. The US burdens consumers with tariffs in the name of fairness, while Canada cautiously leverages stability to attract trade. Yet the supply chains, families, and businesses remain intertwined, unable to fully decouple. Inflation, consolidation, and uncertainty weigh on both sides. In the race to shape the future, will North America win together or fail apart? Are you American or Canadian? Share your story below. Share your